takes voltage to the stomach, the breast, the mouth, the nose, the lips, and the upper eyelid. So, for example, if your stomach circuit has low voltage in it, you might have indigestion, cysts or tumors in your breast, ulcers in your mouth, a bloody nose, cracked lips, and a rash on your upper eyelid, all because you have low voltage in that circuit. This slide shows you that some organs have more than one wire taking voltage to them. For example, your armpit gets its voltage from the circuit called the heart circuit. However, look at brain. Brain has 3 wires bringing voltage to it: the heart, the spleen, and the bladder. So if you have a brain problem like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, brain injuries, and so forth, you will find low voltage in one or more of these circuits. This diagram shows you that our bodies are wired up like other circuit boards. For example, you always have 2 organs wired together in what's called a Tesla resonating circuit. This contains a capacitor and a coil. So for example, the heart serves as a capacitor and the small intestine serves as a coil. These resonating circuits are then wired in what is called series, so that whatever you do to one organ in the body, you actually do to every other organ in the body. This also shows us that because all of these various devices are in resonance with each other, then we should try to keep all of as many body parts as we can. For example, if you remove your gallbladder, you have removed the coil from the liver gallbladder circuit, and it's no longer in resonance the way it's supposed to. Now, there are a variety of ways that the body normally gets voltage or electrons. You get them from unprocessed food, from moving water, from salt and minerals, from sunshine, from exercise, etc. Eventually, all of these various sources provide us with a body pool of electrons. There are 3 trucking systems that take the electrons down to the cells or to the organs. These 3 trucking systems are the ionic transfer of electrons in our blood plasma. The fiber sheath around our nerves is called the analog perineural nervous system, and then the acupuncture system. So the 3 trucking systems are blood, nerves, and acupuncture. Our cell membranes serve as sort of a savings account for voltage. Underneath the cell membranes we have a device called the mitochondria. Inside the mitochondria we have a rechargeable battery system. When the battery is charged up, we call it ATP. When it's discharged, we call it ADP. The ATP battery provides the power for all of the cells to do whatever work they do. Once this ATP battery begins to supply electrons to make the cell work, of course it discharges, and when it's in its discharge state, it's called ADP. We must therefore charge it back up, so we bring electrons from the cell membrane down into the mitochondria, add a little phosphorus in, and charge it back up to ATP. This process of discharging and recharging occurs about 70 times per day in every cell. The ATP battery provides all of the final power for the cell, and thus this is perhaps the most important source of power to keep the body working. Because chronic disease is associated with a loss of voltage, and because on this slide you see the power grid for the body, you generally will find the reason that you are sick by studying the power grid on this slide. When chronic disease exists, one must ask the question, why did the voltage drop enough to allow me to get sick? Most of the time you will find the answer by looking at the power grid I have just shown you. If you can answer the question, you usually know how to get well. I'm going to quickly tell you the most common reasons that people lose power and thus become sick, and then we'll go back and look more closely at each one of those. One of the reasons that people lose their voltage and thus get sick is because of the cell membranes becoming where they cannot store electrons. The reasons that the cell membranes won't hold a charge is because you eat trans fats or plastic fats, and thus the membrane won't hold a charge and you become a dead battery. There are 3 primary reasons that the mitochondria battery system fails. First of all, the number of mitochondria in the body, and thus the number of rechargeable ATP-ADP batteries, is dictated by the amount of functional thyroid hormone you have. Notice I used the word functional, and we'll come back and talk about that. Next, the mitochondria are destroyed by heavy metals like lead, mercury, and cadmium. Next, mitochondria are destroyed if you have dental infections. The kind of bacteria that are able to infect your teeth put out poisons called thioethers and gliotoxins, and these simply shut down the mitochondria. We must also pay attention to the control of the trucking systems. The trucking systems are the autonomic nervous system and the endocrine system, or the hormones, and these control the flow of electrons to the various organs. The autonomic and endocrine systems are controlled by neurochemicals like dopamine and serotonin. To make a neurochemical requires one protein and 6 or 8 vitamins and minerals. If you're missing one vitamin or one mineral, you can't make them. In my experience, the easiest way to restore neurochemicals is with the use of the microscopic plants in the ocean called marine phytoplankton. These microscopic plants will go easily past the blood-brain barrier and allow you to restore the neurochemicals in about 4 to 6 months. The product that's available in the U.S. with marine phytoplankton is called Frequency by Forever Green. So the primary causes of low voltage and thus chronic disease are plastic fats, which destroy the cell membrane battery, hypothyroidism, which reduces the number of mitochondria, heavy metals, which destroy mitochondria, dental decay, root canals, and bone infections, which produce thioethers that destroy the mitochondria, and various toxins. We're now going to look at these one at a time. When cell membranes are made of plastic fats, then you become a dead battery and won't hold a charge, so no matter how many electrons we put into you, you're still a dead battery and your voltage will stay low. If your car battery is dead and you put a battery charger on it and find that the battery is still dead tomorrow, it means that the plates inside of the battery simply won't hold the electrons. Our cell membranes are made up of phospholipids, a specialized fat. They have a ball and 2 legs. The ball is an electron conductor and the legs are electron insulators. Cell membranes are made up of opposing pairs of these phospholipids. Thus you have 2 conductors separated by an insulator. Any place on the planet you have 2 conductors separated by an insulator, you have what's called a capacitor. A capacitor is something designed to store electrons, and thus our cell membranes are designed as little batteries or to store voltage for the cell. The problem comes in because the food manufacturers were losing money from spoilage of their products. They found that the primary thing that spoiled in their products is that the fats turned rancid. They then found that if they cook fats for 5 hours at 350 degrees, the fats turn into something very similar to plastic. Thus, by having the fats be plastic, they have a longer shelf life. These plastic fats are called trans fats or partially hydrogenated fats. If you look at the label and see that it says it contains partially hydrogenated fats, then you're eating plastic and making your cell membranes out of plastic and they won't hold a charge. We use a device called the biological impedance analysis device to tell whether or not you're a dead battery. This device is widely used by every major physiology lab in the world. It gives us a variety of different pieces of information, but one of the pieces it gives us is a thing called phase angle. If your phase angle is below 7, then you are beginning to become a dead battery. Certainly if your phase angle becomes down around 5, you won't hold a charge no matter how many electrons we put into you. If you're a dead battery, you must eat a lot of good fat to repair your cell membranes. A good fat is any fat that will spoil. Examples are avocados, raw nuts, safflower oil, sunflower oil, borage oil, olive oil, corn oil, etc. The best oil for cooking is coconut because it withstands the heat better than olive oil. There are basically 2 types of fats, saturated fats and omega fats. The saturated fats function much like bricks, and the omega fats function much like doors and windows. If you were to build a house out of just bricks, it would be very substantial, but you couldn't use it because you can't get in and you can't get out. If you build a house just out of doors and windows, the first wind that comes along blows it down. We have the same situation with our cell membranes. If we make them out of too many saturated fats, they're not porous. If we make them out of too many omega fats, then they become fragile. According to the respected researcher Yehuda, we need 4 times as many saturated fats as we do omega fats to make the perfect cell. Thus, saturated fats are functioning much like bricks in our homes, omega-6s and 9s are functioning much like windows, and omega-3s are functioning much like doors. We need 4 times as many bricks as we do windows, and 4 times as many windows as we do doors. Thus, we need 4 times as much saturated fat as omega-6 and 9, and 4 times as much omega-6 and 9 as we need omega-3s. Saturated fats are things like coconut, palm, beef, mutton, butter, cocoa, lard, eggs, etc. Omega-6s and 9s are things like safflower, olive, sesame, rice, butter, corn, sunflower, oat, peanut, etc. Omega-3s are primarily flax and fish oil. Fish oil has much more energy in it than flax. If you need more fat, the best source is raw milk. Raw milk has all of the fat you need in exactly the right proportions. Raw milk and cream are total foods. By that I mean that everything is there that is necessary for life. The offspring of mammals thrive on mother's milk, and millions of children have thrived on cow's milk. When you cook milk to pasteurize it, you damage the proteins. When you blow milk through nozzles to homogenize it, you fracture the long fat chains into little toxic pieces. Pasteurized and homogenized milk is toxic. Raw milk is a near-perfect food. Many people feel that they have lactose intolerance. The reality is they're just allergic to the toxic brew that we call pasteurized homogenized milk. Others are afraid that they will get infections from raw milk. The reality is if you take a glass of raw milk and a glass of pasteurized milk and put equal amounts of bacteria in them, the raw milk will fairly quickly kill the bacteria because of the peroxidases and enzymes that are present in the raw milk. However, these have been destroyed in the pasteurized milk and the infections will grow rapidly. If you look at the data from the Center for Disease Control, 90% of infections from milk come from pasteurized milk, not from raw milk. Another total food is eggs. However, eggs are often from chickens who are fed hormones, have their necks held in clamps keeping them from moving, with lights on day and night so that they lay more eggs. They are fed processed food. Free-range or cage-free eggs have more voltage and fewer toxins. Cooking eggs does remove some of their value. We are discussing the primary causes of low voltage and thus chronic disease. We have just finished discussing plastic fats, which cause the cell membranes to be unable to store voltage. Now we're going to discuss hypothyroidism, which reduces the number of mitochondria. A critical thing to understand is that the total number of mitochondria, and thus the number of rechargeable ATP, ADP batteries you have, is dictated by the amount of functional thyroid hormone present. Before we can discuss hypothyroidism itself, we must first discuss metabolic syndrome X and then discuss iodine deficiency. Many doctors feel that metabolic syndrome X is the basic reason for most illness in the United States. So what is metabolic syndrome X and why is electrifier useful in recovering from it? Metabolic syndrome X has certain symptoms and features. They are, number 1, fasting hyperglycemia with diabetes mellitus type 2 or impaired fasting glucose, impaired glucose tolerance, or insulin resistance. Number 2, high blood pressure. Number 3, central obesity, also known as visceral, male pattern, or apple-shaped obesity. Overweight with fat deposits mainly around the waist. Number 4, decreased HDL cholesterol and elevated triglycerides. In this image you will see the things that you and or many of your friends are suffering from: high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, apple-shaped obesity, and increased blood fats. This syndrome with these 4 things often leads to heart attacks, strokes, fibromyalgia, and eventually cancer. In this image, you will see on the left what is called apple obesity and on the right what is called pear obesity. In apple obesity, you are bigger around your waist than you are around your hips. The problem with this pattern is that it leads to disease and various types of illnesses. However, if you're bigger around your hips than you are around your waist, we call this pear-shaped obesity. This does not lead to the same chronic diseases as apple obesity. In addition to hypothyroidism, a major contributor to obesity is MSG. Leptin is a hormone released to tell your brain that you are full. MSG damages the brain so that it does not recognize leptin, thus you always feel hungry. MSG is put into foods because it is addicting and it makes you want to eat more, which leads to more profits for the food manufacturers. MSG is often hidden in foods by calling it, quote, other spices, end of quote. Here is one of the medical studies that demonstrates the effects of MSG on obesity. It notes that leptin is a protein secreted by the fat cells that is important in regulating appetite and being obese. Neonatal administration of monosodium glutamate, or MSG, damages the arcuate nucleus of the hypothalamus, resulting in obesity and neuroendocrine dysfunction. In traditional medicine, we've not found a solution for metabolic syndrome X except for diet and exercise. We tend to give medication to lower blood pressure, medication to lower blood sugar, medication to lower cholesterol levels, and medication to try to eliminate the obesity. Oftentimes, this does not cure the problem, but simply makes our labs and blood pressure measurements look better. Metabolic syndrome X often precedes to fibromyalgia. After we discuss type 2 hypothyroidism, I believe you will agree with me that metabolic syndrome X is caused by type 2 hypothyroidism. As you will see in this discussion, we will find the causes for stress, heart attacks, ADHD, migraine headaches, childhood obesity, and adult obesity, all of which are epidemic in our country. In preparation for discussing hypothyroidism, we must discuss iodine. Every organ in the body that secretes something needs large amounts of iodine. We're aware, of course, that the thyroid gland uses iodine to make thyroid hormone. However, our salivary glands, our cerebrospinal fluid with the brain, the lining of our intestine, the choroid plexus in our brain, breasts, ovaries, prostate, ciliary body of the eye, nose, sinuses, mouth, etc. All of these things that secrete something need large amounts of iodine. If you look carefully, you'll notice that these are the same organs that normally get cancer. It is also interesting to note that the Japanese, who eat more iodine than anybody on the planet, have the least amount of cancer of anybody on the planet. It is important to note that iodine kills all single-celled organisms like viruses, bacteria, fungi, and protozoa. Iodine comes in two general forms, water-based and alcohol-based. Jean Le Gall, a Paris physician in 1829, discovered that iodine is more soluble in water that contains potassium iodide. This is what's called Lugol solution and is used to replace iodine levels in the human. Tincture of iodine, on the other hand, means that it is an alcohol base and is useful for cuts and scrapes, but should not be used to replace iodine in the body because of the presence of the alcohol. Iodine is bactericidal even at dilutions of 1 to 170,000. Microorganisms do not develop resistance to iodine. Iodine is so important in brain development that iodine deficiency is the leading cause of intellectual impairment in the world. Hypothyroidism is the leading cause of violent behavior in the world, and most people in prison are hypothyroid. As we mentioned, Japan has the highest intake per capita of iodine and the lowest incidence of cancer, except for stomach cancer, in the world. It was suggested by Campbell in the China study that the reduction in cancer and heart disease in Asia was due to a vegetarian diet, but the differences may well be in the amount of iodine consumed and not in the amount of meat consumed. The parts of the body exposed to the outside world have iodine levels 30 times the blood level. Thus, iodine is the immune system's bug killer. Drinking Lugol solution is the best treatment for food poisoning as it kills the bacteria. Lugol solution will inactivate snake venoms. Nitrates, such as found as hot dogs, bologna, and processed meats, inactivate iodine and allow Helicobacter pylori to grow in the stomach and cause stomach ulcers and cancer. This is most likely the reason that the Japanese have stomach cancer but not others. Large foreign proteins ingested are inactivated by iodine, preventing them from becoming allergens. The energy in fats is contained in their double bonds. These double bonds are protected by iodine. Fetal iodine is 5 times the level in the mother. Low maternal iodine can lead to miscarriages, birth defects, failure to thrive, mental retardation, etc. Thus, it's very important for women who are going to become pregnant to correct their levels of iodine. Only micrograms of iodine are found in table salt, and some of the companies are now using bromide instead of iodine because it's cheaper in spite of the fact it is toxic. Adults need about 12 to 15 milligrams of iodine per day. Thus, every person in the United States tends to be iodine deficient because the iodine that was in our soil has been washed into the ocean, and essentially none is available in our food. Thus, every person should be taking iodine to stop having infections and to help prevent cancer. Taking iodine in pill form can kill all of the good bacteria in your gut. Thus, I prefer to dose it through the skin. If you simply spray Lugols onto the skin each morning after your bath, you will notice that it turns the skin orange, and oftentimes you have to catch the little drizzle with a handkerchief or a napkin or something. I recommend that you then use a hairdryer to dry it so it doesn't stain your clothing. Remember to use only water-based Lugols and not iodine-containing alcohol. When the body needs the iodine, it will simply absorb it right through the skin, and tomorrow you'll notice that where you sprayed it is now normal again. Thus, you should repeat spraying it until the body quits taking it through the skin. This means that your tank of iodine is full. When that happens, your skin tomorrow will look like what you see in the right photo here. That is very similar to the way it was once you finished spraying it on this morning. Once you know that your tank of iodine is full, then just use it once a week for maintenance. Now let's discuss hypothyroidism type 2. Much of this information comes from the wonderful book Hypothyroidism Type 2 by Dr. Mark Starr, and I encourage you to obtain this book and read it. It is estimated that up to 90% of the American population has undiagnosed hypothyroidism. This epidemic is causing havoc with our mental and physical health. It is easily and inexpensively treated. The primary cause is fluoride in our water and dental products. Our pituitary gland puts out thyroid-stimulating hormone, or TSH. This stimulates the thyroid gland to put out thyroid hormone called T4. It is then converted to the active form called T3. We physicians tend to do blood tests measuring your levels of TSH, T4, and T3. When those come back normal, we tell you that your thyroid is functioning just fine. I'm going to now show you why that's simply not true. Iodine is a halogen. The halogens are a series of nonmetal elements from the periodic table comprising fluorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine, and astatine. Here you can see the halogens in the periodic table going from fluorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine, and astatine. The problem is that fluoride is a bully. Whenever you have an atom of fluoride and an atom of any other halogen present, the fluoride will displace the other halogen and take its place. In the left image, you see a diagram of what would be considered T4, or thyroid hormone. There's a protein in the middle called tyrosine and 4 iodines surrounding it. On the right, you see what happens when fluoride is present. Fluoride simply displaces the iodine, and now we have a tyrosine with 4 fluorides around it. It appears that our laboratory tests cannot differentiate between normal thyroid hormone with iodine and fake thyroid hormone with fluoride. The problem is that the one with fluoride doesn't work. Since it appears that the blood test can't tell the difference between the real thyroid hormone and the iodine and the fake thyroid hormone with fluoride, the blood tests have become back normal, but the fake hormone doesn't work, and thus the blood tests are simply inaccurate or confused by the presence of fluoride. For this reason, most Americans are hypothyroid, and this is simply because we've consumed so much fluoride. This is what is called type 2 hypothyroidism, when the blood tests are normal, but you're still quite hypothyroid. Many have falsely assumed that correcting your iodine deficiency will allow your thyroid gland to make adequate amounts of thyroid hormone. This almost always is incorrect. In 1996, Mahmoud investigated the effects of low doses of sodium fluoride on the thyroid glands of guinea pigs. He found depletion of colloid from the follicles, shrinkage of the follicles, disruption of the follicular basement membrane associated with edema and degeneration of the follicular epithelial cells, increased follicular vascularity, and fatty degeneration in the interfollicular connective tissue. Basically, what he found was that fluoride destroys your thyroid gland. One of the illnesses of the thyroid gland is known as Hashimoto's disease. A high-power view of Hashimoto's thyroiditis shows lymphoid follicles within the thyroid tissue, and the arrow points to a germinal center. Note that the small lymphocytes infiltrating between the follicular cells. The thyroid follicles are small with no colloid, and the follicular cells have eosinophilic cytoplasm. Well, this description of Hashimoto's disease, which is felt to be an autoimmune disease, looks very much like what is described as the end result of fluoride. And thus, it appears that the upper photo is what a normal thyroid looks like, and the bottom photo is what a thyroid gland looks like after it's been exposed to fluoride. Since fluoride permanently damages the thyroid gland, just stopping fluoride and taking iodine rarely gives you adequate thyroid hormone. Most people exposed to fluoride, which is the majority of people in the United States, will permanently require supplemental thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormone requires a prescription in the United States. There are other things that cause hypothyroidism besides just fluoride. Estrogen dominance means that there is effectively more estrogen in your system than progesterone. This is true in both males and females. Estrogen dominance is caused by eating soy, breathing or being around petrochemicals, the fuel exhaust we breathe, estrogenic hormones in meats and chickens, plastics, cooking food in plastics, polypropylene glycol, which is present in deodorants, sodium lauryl sulfate, which is in toothpaste and ointments, herbicides and pesticides. These potent estrogenic substances block the production of thyroid hormone and greatly magnify the incidence of estrogen-dependent cancers. All males and females in developed nations have estrogen dominance. In addition, antibiotics, chlorine from our water purification systems, fluoride, NSAID drugs, which are drugs like aspirin, Motrin, Aleve, etc., which are used for arthritis, all kill the healthy bacteria in the intestinal tract. This results in an overgrowth in the intestine of candida, fungus, mycoplasma, and anaerobic bacteria, such as the yeast syndrome. These dangerous organisms release powerful neurotoxic substances into the bloodstream that damage the hypothalamus, often resulting in multiple endocrine disorders, including underactivity of the thyroid gland. Mercury, released from our dental amalgams, is toxic to the thyroid gland. Selenium deficiency is related to a lack of trace minerals in our soils. The proper conversion of precursors into thyroid hormone depends on a selenium-containing enzyme which is lacking. Of course, lack of iodine in our soil and diet leads to decreased thyroid hormone production. Diagnostic x-rays of the teeth, the neck, and the spine injure the thyroid gland. Perchlorates are widely found in drinking water, and they inhibit the production of thyroid hormone by blocking the reuptake of iodine. Perchlorates are the salts derived from perchloric acid. They occur both naturally and through manufacturing. They have been used as a medicine for more than 50 years to treat thyroid gland disorders. Levels above 0.007 milligrams per kilogram per day of perchlorate can temporarily and reversibly inhibit the thyroid gland's ability to absorb iodine from the bloodstream. Thus, perchlorate is known to cause goiters, As of April 2007, the EPA has not yet determined whether perchlorate is present at sufficient levels in the environment to require a nationwide regulation on how much should be allowed in our drinking water. Since we cannot use blood tests to diagnose hypothyroidism, how do we diagnose it? We can measure our basal body temperature, which is our temperature at rest before our muscles create heat. You should put a thermometer at your bedside. You should use a temporal artery thermometer, particularly one made by Exergen. Most of the thermometers that you buy at the drugstore today are very inaccurate. The most accurate is the temporal artery thermometer. So put a thermometer at your bedside, and before you get up in your morning, take your temperature. Do not use oral temperature because they are artificially high due to sinus and oral infections. If your morning temperature is less than 97.6, you have hypothyroidism type 2. You will need to take Lugol's iodine, as I have mentioned before, to help your immune system to work correctly and help prevent malignancies. If your temperature is below 97.6, you will also need to take thyroid hormone. This requires your seeing a physician. Once you become hypothyroid, your body makes mucin. Mucin is like clear Karo syrup. It is deposited into the tissue in hypothyroid patients. It is often mistaken for fat in metabolic syndrome X. People with hypothyroidism have a combination of fat and mucin in their tissue. If you pinch over your deltoid muscle, you should be able to almost put your fingers together. Any bulk that you feel over this muscle is mucin. In the picture in the upper left, you see mucin in the tissue. Notice how it appears as if there is a clear syrup scattered throughout the cells. The other pictures show before and after treatments of hypothyroidism, and you can see the dramatic change. In the lower right, you see a cute little baby with chubby cheeks who just happens to be hypothyroid. Mucin in the tissue makes it difficult for blood to flow through the tissue. The body increases blood pressure to force the blood through the tissue. This is called high blood pressure or hypertension. Number 2, mucin surrounds cell membranes, making it difficult for insulin to access the cell membrane. This leads to insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes. Number 3, mucin is deposited in the organs of the abdomen and in the omentum, resulting in what is known as a beer belly, obesity. Hypothyroidism makes people tired. They crave sugar and caffeine to be able to get through the day. This increased intake of sugars in the form of high fructose corn syrup increases fat in tissue and creates high insulin levels. Intake of caffeine makes you depleted in neurochemicals, leading to brain fog, insomnia, poor memory, anger, confusion, etc. It also acts as a diuretic and lowers your voltage. Number 5, lack of thyroid hormone reduces production of all hormones. When hormones are low, the liver increases its production of cholesterol in an effort to normalize other hormone levels, since all hormones are made from cholesterol. Thus, hypothyroidism results in cravings of sugar and caffeine, which results in the increased intake of sodas, high caffeine energy drinks, coffee, etc. Ignoring the fact that it is hypothyroidism, the traditional therapy for metabolic syndrome X is as follows. For hypertension, we give medication to lower the blood pressure, making circulation through the mucin even more difficult, resulting in less nutrition and oxygen to the cells. In diabetes, we give medications to lower blood sugar, resulting in even lower amounts of sugar inside the cells where it matters. In obesity, we band the stomach so the body gets very little nutrition. For high cholesterol and triglycerides, we give medications to lower cholesterol, making it even harder for the body to make hormones and repair the brain. Remember, the brain is 50% cholesterol by weight. There's a large volume of literature about the toxicity of fluoride. Here's a sampling. Around 1917-1918, a dentist named F.S. McKay moved to Colorado Springs, Colorado, where he noted that people in that area tended to have teeth that looked like those in the lower right picture. He also noted that people with these model teeth rarely had cavities. He later named this dental fluorosis and wrote in the journal Dental Cosmos that enamel conditions in children with mottled teeth are identical to those reported by Professor Greaves in Holland as being due to thyroid dysfunction with goiter. Greaves reported that when rats were given water from the Utrecht area, goiter in mottled enamel developed. Between 1919 and 1921, ignorant of Mackay's work, Goldenberg in Argentina investigated the areas then commonly referred to as, quote, goitrous waters, and reviewed the work of others, Repin, Cordier, Klausmann, Macarissen, Parhau, and Goldstein, Pichidi, Christiani, etc. His findings convinced him that the worldwide occurrence of goiter and cretinism was not due to iodine deficiency as commonly believed, but it was the result of excessive fluoride intake from air, food, and water. In 1926, Goldenberg was the first to take medical advantage of the now much observed iodine-fluoride antagonism. He deliberated that because fluoride was the reason behind iodine deficiency in goiter areas, it would be therefore also able to reduce the high iodine levels in Basedow patients, and began to use fluorides to effectively cure Basedow's disease, which is hyperthyroidism caused by excessive iodine consumption. Goldenberg published extensively between 1921 and 1935 on his findings of applying fluorides as anti-thyroid medication. In 1932, Maciaro of Italy used sodium fluoride in the successful treatment of overactive or hyperthyroidism. Also in 1932, Wilhelm May in Germany started using fluoride therapy in the treatment of hyperthyroidism using calcium fluoride tablets, topical ointments, etc. In 1933, Gorlitzer von Munde in Austria reported more on fluoride's effect on the thyroid. In 1934, Burgess and colleagues in Poland gave chicken eggs high in fluoride to hyperthyroid patients and achieved lowering of body temperature, of pulse, and basal metabolic rate, as well as weight gain. He reported that most of the fluoride is found in the liver, that the fluoride is found in the blood of healthy people. In 1937, Kraft of Germany investigated inorganic sodium fluoride and organic fluoride compounds and reported that all fluoride compounds inhibit thyroid hormones. It is a matter of amplification. The fluoride component is essential. In 1941, Wilson of the UK reported in The Lancet on his findings that mottling of teeth is prevalent in the same areas in the UK which had previously been prevalent with goiter. In 1941, Schwartz of Germany prepared fluoride, iodine, anti-thyroid medications and combined them with sedatives. In 1946, the Atomic Energy Commission, the Department of Pharmacology and Toxicology, headed by Harold Carpenter Hodge, incomprehensibly at the same time also head of the International Association for Dental Research, acknowledged the German findings that all fluoride compounds, organic or inorganic, inhibit thyroid hormone activity and declares this issue a research priority. No further research into this issue was conducted, however. In 1952, in the court case Reynolds Metals Corporation versus Paul Martin, hypothyroidism caused by fluoride is documented. In 1953, in India, there were reports that fluoride concentrated in the thyroid gland of rats consuming 0.9 milligrams of fluoride per day. In 1957, Galetti et al. Treated hyperthyroid patients with fluoride at daily doses lower than those estimated being the current average intake in the United States, and documented a significant reduction in protein-bound iodine as well as an overall reduction of iodine and a reduction of iodine uptake by the thyroid gland. In 1959, Genser shows that reduced iodine levels in the pituitary gland under the influence of fluorides. In 1960, Gordanoff and Mender described the results of experiments with radioactive iodine, which shows that fluorides remove an iodine atom during the conversion process from T4 to T3. Effects are dose responsive, meaning the higher the fluoride intake, the lower the iodine measurements. In 1962, Stein in Africa reported that drinking water containing as little as 1 to 2 parts per million of fluorine can cause serious disturbances of general health, and especially in normal thyroid gland function and in the normal processes of calcium phosphate metabolism, or parathyroid function. 1 to 2 parts per million is approximately what we put in our water in the United States. In 1962, Spira reported on the fluorine-induced endocrine disturbances in mental illnesses. In 1963, Gorlitzer von Mundi reported on the then current knowledge gained from experiments by Gordanoff with radioactive iodine as to how the effects of the enzyme responsible for converting T4 to T3 were inhibited if a fluoride ion was absorbed before the conversion from T4 to T3 occurs. There's a great deal more evidence from the scientific literature showing that fluoride inactivates thyroid function. Because fluoride is more active, it replaces iodine whenever both are present. Because fluoride inactivates iodine, it was used early in the 1900s to successfully treat hyperthyroidism. When fluoride is given to those with normal or decreased iodine levels, it makes them hypothyroid. Most Americans are exposed to fluoride in water, by dental treatments and toothpaste, and even in children's vitamins. Denmark, Holland, Finland, France, Germany, and Japan have rejected fluoride, citing public health concerns. Plans to make fluoridation mandatory in Britain were suspended in 1998 after the British Home Secretary intervened and urged the Health Secretary to review the negative evidence. Although most people who are hypothyroid will appear overweight, there is a phenomenon called paradoxical hypothyroidism. A minority of people with hypothyroidism are skinny, have a rapid heartbeat, and suffer tremors and anxiety. The only way to diagnose hypothyroid in them is to take their temperature, and the fact that their symptoms disappear with thyroid therapy. Now let's discuss whether or not there is a relationship between thyroid-stimulating hormone and osteoporosis. In the early 1990s, it was suggested that very low levels of TSH, and thus too high levels of thyroid hormone, were associated with osteoporosis. For this reason, doctors are currently taught to lower the amount of thyroid hormone taken if the TSH is lower than so-called normal. Remember, however, that the TSH in T3 and T4 labs are made incorrect by fluoride. Mary J. Schoeman and Dr. William Klein summarized what is available in the literature. The effects of thyroid hormone on bone density and bone strength, as well as risk of osteoporosis, are still being debated, even after many studies have been conducted attempting to addressing this question.